Flying in. It's good to see you here. So, welcome to this to the session COP28: Economic and Environmental Consequences of Achieving a Carbon Neutral Future. That is the topic of today. My name is Bente Dalsbæk. I'll be the moderator today. As we all know, a net zero transition will entail a significant shift in both demand, in capital allocation, in costs, and in jobs. So the question is actually as simple as it's complicated. With uneven effects on sectors, on geographies, on communities, how will we get there? Very simple question, very complicated answers that you will, I hope, fulfill some of the audience's curiosity towards today. So, how will we create the economic growth and leave no one behind, which I think is one of the things that we should focus us also today. And how we'll do this together in dialogue and in cooperation across borders. So, we're having the COP28 in UAE in November, and it offers an opportunity to rethink and reboot and refocus the climate agenda. But we will get a little ahead of that today. We will have, let's call it a preliminary session, where we are fortunate to get some perspectives from some of the challenges and the opportunities from a highly knowledgeable and skilled panel. And I'm happy to introduce you. First of all, Mr. Nurlan Zakupov, CEO of Samruk-Kazyna. Warm welcome. Yes, and we'll just press the button here. And then David Moran, UK Regional Climate and Energy Security Ambassador for Europe and Central Asia. Welcome to you. Dr. Matthew Sagers, Vice President of S&P Global. Welcome to you. Daria Luguti, now arrived, Director of Sustainable Energy, UNECE. And Bella Ferenczi, who are President of GE Russia. Welcome to you. And last but not least, Ariel Cohen, who is Manager Director of Energy Growth and Security Program, International Tax and Investment Center at the think tank Atlantic Council, Eurasia Center. So let's give them applause. Thank you for being here today. So, yeah, we are a large panel. And with only so much time, and we are also a little shorter of time than we thought we would be, so we are only going on 1 hour. And I also know that you, Mr. Zakupov, is having a very important engagement later, so you have to go away from us a little earlier. But we'll have time to hear your key points, and that's very valuable. And I will actually start with a question to each of you, and it's because from your special perspective and outlook, what do you see as the immediate and most important challenge that we, or task that we have before COP28? We are COP28 just around the corner, and we are entering a high-speed lane towards 2030 and beyond. So what are the challenges that you are focusing on, the task ahead? And what are you, can I ask, because I'm going to ask all of you that later, but you are going your personal ambition for COP28 as well.
Thank you, Bente. Hi, everyone. First of all, I'm very honored to be the speaker on this esteemed panel, along with my dear fellow panelists. As the CEO of Samruk-Kazyna, I can reiterate that we as a country and as Samruk-Kazyna are fully and truly committed to the principles of decarbonization. We are faithfully executing the main principles of 2015 Paris carbon neutrality agreement. And according to our national plan, by 2030 we will have to reduce the fossil fuel emissions by 15%, and we plan to become and will become carbon neutral by 2016. We have a precise plan in our mind, And as Samruk Kazina, we account for roughly 15% of CO2 emissions within Kazakhstan. Therefore, it's the area where we put a lot of attention and focus. What are the challenges and what are we doing? Basically, in the next 2 to 4 years, we plan to put into operations roughly about 6+ gigawatt of clean energy. Today, we signed a collaboration agreement with Masdar. So in 2 years' time, we hope to put into operations 1 gigawatt wind farm in Jambul region. We also signed a roadmap within the framework of Astana International Forum with our colleagues from China Power International Holding. We also plan to launch 1 gigawatt wind energy with them. They're our long-standing partner. They've been here on the ground. They know the rules of the game and they feel quite comfortable with our investment climate. We also signed just before this panel an agreement, a detailed roadmap with Aqua Parwa for 1 gigawatt wind farm in Jambul region. There is a plan to increase renewables energy in Almaty region by wind and hydro up to 1 gigawatt. And moreover, I would like to underscore within the framework of this panel discussion, in Almaty, the largest megapolises in Kazakhstan and one of the largest cities in Central Asia, we are making our relevant efforts and already transferring the coal-fired generation plants to gas. We've done the first step, and it will be 1 gigawatt of clean energy in less than 2 years, in Almaty specifically. So we are moving ahead, and we will continue our efforts, and our personal goal as Samruk Kazina to reduce CO2 emissions by 10% within the group of companies of Samruk Kazina by no later than 2032.
It sounds like you have some busy days here.
Like everyone, yeah.
Yes.
Every minute, yeah.
But also, with reference to COP28, your personal ambition that you are taking to COP28?
As my personal ambition is to sign PPA with Masdar within the framework of COP28. As mentioned earlier, we are moving quite fast with them. There is a tariff in place. We hope to agree on the tariff with our regulator within next couple of weeks. Once this is done, we will start working on the intergovernmental agreement, and by mid-November that should be signed, and then PPA is only a technicality. So therefore, this is my ambitious goal for COP28.
We have noted that now. So I'll move on to you, David Moran. Could you also give us your perspective on the challenges and the task ahead before COP28?
Well, thank you very much. And as a COP26 envoy, I look at it at the experience of somebody who took part in organizing and delivering a big COP, and then following it up, working with the Egyptians on their COP as the immediate predecessor. And, you know, many things strike me about COPs. The official work, the negotiations on mitigation, adaptation, finance, they're really important, and the pavilion work, the networking, is great for bringing people together. But I think we're losing an opportunity, or risk losing an opportunity for maximum bang for the buck, if I can use that expression. Because we have I'm speaking as a sort of practical Brit, we have an awful lot of theory, we have a lot of strategies, but there's an also a lot of toolboxes and collaborative mechanisms which we're not making the most of, and we're not necessarily using the COP framework and the presence of leaders and ministers to drive forward the transition, which has to be, the energy transition, 5 times faster than it is at the moment. So there are some very good ways. I was hearing about UNDP toolboxes. We created several of these forums and toolboxes, mechanisms at Glasgow, and I'd like to just mention now, you said to front load what I might have said later. The breakthrough agenda looks at five sectors, and it's, if I can refer to notes, it commits countries to work together to make clean technologies and sustainable solutions the most affordable, accessible, and attractive option in the emitting sectors globally before 2030, and its power, road transport, steel, hydrogen, which is an area of interest for Kazakhstan, I understand, and agriculture. And together these sectors, they account for nearly 60% of global greenhouse gas emissions today, and could deliver the bulk of the emission reductions needed by 2030. So this is a framework that you can use. The original commitment when you join, there's an independent review which is done every year. The ministers then later review and look at priority actions which have been recommended, and then the leaders at or before COP judge where they are. And this isn't about grading people or whatever. This is a joint collective endeavor which people, ordinary people, can see and say, yes, things are happening. It's not just about targets, it's about action, and it's happening at the COP.
Thank you, and as you were speaking, I saw Dr. Matthew Segas already beginning to take notes, because you were reacting a bit to what was said. What was it that made you grab your pen?
Well, I was ready to just line out everything I had, because essentially you sort of anticipated what I was going to say. So toolboxes and then the priority sectors were kind of my 2 ideas. But to go back to the beginning, I think what's really important to think about with this transition is it's policy driven. This is very different from the other energy transitions we've seen. It's policy, and it's also supposed to happen much more quickly, unfold more rapidly over time. So therefore, the key questions that I've had about this is really, what's the proper mix of policy to drive this? What sticks are available? What carrots are available? It comes back to your toolbox question. But the problem that I have in terms of visualizing this is, for carrots, almost always these end up turning out to be subsidies in one kind or another. And subsidies can work at the beginning to kind of prime the pump and everything, but as the thing evolves into scale, you've got to move beyond that. And so carrots, you kind of end up with kind of a, are they going to work longer time as these things become larger and larger? On the other side, sticks, yeah, we're all aware sticks can work pretty well. We don't like them very much. They can work pretty well, but again, the problem with either regulatory or mandates, thou shalt consume thy hydrogen in the following quantities, by 2030. These mandates end up being kind of picking winners and losers without a lot of the market-driven forces and innovation that sort of are involved. So, like I said, this mix of toolbox, this pick, I think is going to be pretty interesting in affecting this. The other one is what you were talking about in terms of priority sectors. I think for each one of these priority sectors, it's going to be very different. How do the policymakers in each country basically pick and choose, what they're going to use as their priority vectors? Electric power is one of the obvious ones. Everybody always talks about it. I mean, most certainly, in your case for Kazakhstan, first thing you're talking about is we have these projects that are coming along, and we can see renewables as being there. But again, what are the regulatory means that you use to drive that? Transportation is another. We're all aware of electrification as being the key thing. And then, on industry and agriculture, you're talking about making some broader changes in terms of processes and mix, and for agriculture, probably a change in terms of how you do things, and probably the outputs at the end. I mean, it's very well known now that two products, beef and rice, are pretty carbon intensive, and it's a pretty big ask to talk about certain kinds of cultures. Hey, eat less beef and eat less rice. I mean, those are pretty tough asks. So I see these as being challenges to try and figure out what is the mix of policy to drive this, what is the sort of sectors that I'm going to choose where I can try and be most effective. Those were the immediate things that came to me right off of what Dave was basically offering.
But we can ask you then, Dario Lugiti. It's toolboxes, it's balances, it's a mix. How do you see that from the UNEC's perspective?
Well, first of all, I think it's political will. And I think, and this is what, and before we get to COP, there are a number of milestones extremely important. Let me give you a couple ones. The high-level political forum taking place in New York in July, where all the governments will gather, and they have to commit to the SDGs. I mean, we just published the Sustainable Development Goals report, and we're falling behind in a number of goals, and some of the others are not actually going as fast as needed for the 2030 agenda. So first of all, it starts with political will. I agree with the other panelists that the toolbox is out there. I mean, we are producing toolboxes on carbon. We mentioned about carbon neutrality. We've been mentioning about hydrogen. You talked about hydrogen. One aspect that we didn't discuss is about the critical raw materials. It's great that we're signing all these contracts about deployment of renewable energy, but where do you get the critical raw materials to build the equipment needed for those wind farms and for those solar farms in a sustainable way, so that we don't do the errors that we did when we started producing oil or gas? But first of all, so I said that political will, high-level political forum, and then the summit in September in New York. That's very important to prepare for COP. And here, I think it's, as the Secretary General has said, here governments and governments representing their people need to step up the pace, need to step up their commitments to the Sustainable Development Goals. Otherwise, we're falling behind. And the second perspective to that, I think it's finance. But how you actually bring finance to the table in a way that it's easy to finance wind, solar farms, and renewable energies, relatively speaking. But it's much more difficult to finance the transition. So green finance is one thing, but how about financing the transition? How about financing energy efficiency? Nobody has talked yet about energy efficiency, but that is the first fuel. The first thing that we need to do is to decrease our consumption of energy. And the CEO of an industrial company knows what I'm talking about, because it's very, very important in buildings, for example. So all of those dynamics initiatives that need to be taken, for which we have the toolboxes, we have the products, we have the technologies, they need to be implemented. They need to obviously have regulatory regimes that will help those investments taking place, but they need actual finance. And then, a little bit of innovative finance, and talking about emerging markets, there's a huge discussion about the restructuring of the financial architecture, of the global financial architecture. This COP, we need to see some progress on that space. And you need to see how that is possible to take place. And when I talk about finance, I'm not talking only about the multilateral development banks. I'm talking about the whole finance, including private sources of capital. We won't be doing the energy transition without involving private capital, because the amounts of money are massive. And so those two issues, I think, political will and how we bring to the table as well the financial community in a way that supports the implementation of the solutions that we have, I think are very crucial.
Thank you. I'll get back to the financing in just a moment, but I noticed that you, Bella Firenze, you were moving around in your seat just a minute ago. So what was it that made you react? Because you are sitting with the hands in the toolbox.
That's a very interesting topic, because as I'm listening, I was also lining out my stuff because this is exactly what we are talking about. I think if we want to look at it from a practical, right, our industrial companies, so we are down to earth from politics, right, we need to start acting. We set up all the policies. We have lots of commitments from the governments, right? We need to start executing and doing those things. And Mr. Jakubov just said that it's just happening right now as we speak in Kazakhstan. And it's a very long journey, right? So I have been here for the last 10 years and working with the Ministry of Energy and seeing how it's happening, okay? So we need to be very clear about the beef and rice story because there is a huge difference between developed countries and developing countries. So what can work in Western Europe, right, it would not work in Kazakhstan, and we need to be very mindful. Just as Mr. Zakov said, right, 70% of CO2 emissions in Kazakhstan coming from energy sector, from power generation, 55 coming from coal generation, right? So this is huge. So I think even the dynamics when we are talking about the transition for Kazakhstan, solving that piece of generating, right? This is vital. This is the starting point. And that's the journey they started. And I think renewable energy is a big chunk of it, and it will be happening. But I think for Kazakhstan, for baseload generation, it's critical that we don't forget the transition fuel, the gas fuel, and turn the coal-fired plants into gas generation, right? This is critical. I think on long term, nuclear will play an important role as well for Kazakhstan, but this is not immediate, right? It's the next decade probably, if the decision is made now. So I think this is what we need to be selective, what we do, how we do, and financing, that's a critical one, okay? So just the next 10 years, the decade, right? Mr. Jakubov will correct me if I'm wrong here. It's $1 billion to $2 billion that it needs to be invested in Kazakhstan in the energy sector, right? And the government doesn't have that money to invest themselves. So the private money needs to come in. And while the DFIs and ECAs can help a lot, right? But the private sector also needs to come. We need to fund the technology development. Being an industrial company, right? For us, I have to tell you, technology-wise, from COP26, we got tremendous progress, okay? So just name few, right? We have the hydrogen-fueled gas turbines. We have the sustainable aviation fuel, SMRs. This is just taking off, and in the next decade it will be. So I believe it's going to be a base technology. So the toolbox is there, right? We just need to start implementing, and I think Kazakhstan in the right way.
Thank you very much. I'll give you the word just because you're reacting to Bella Fidenza. I'll be there in a minute, Ariel. But you were reacting on the financing, and you said billions, I think you said.
Absolutely correct. We will invest more than a couple of billions in the next 2 to 4 years. I think you are absolutely right. You hit it on the nail. Our conventional, let me put it, coal-fired generation at the moment is the most efficient from the cost base. It's very stable. As you know, the renewable energy, you need to balance it. And this is another issue that we have to solve, and we are working on it, the balancing capacities. We are, as we speak, we are building gas powered generation facility for 1 gigawatt in Turkestan region in order to enable southern Kazakhstan, in order to strengthen the electricity system in southern Kazakhstan, because we expect new renewable wind driven capacities there. So basically there are, I'm glad that in the eyes of international speakers and international community, there is a good and thorough understanding of the challenges of the transition period. On one hand, we have a conventional, very efficient from cost-based coal-fired generation. On the other hand, bringing in renewables, wind and solar, we need to balance our network, and this is another challenge which we are overcoming. And regarding the funding, I mean, being from the business, I'm sure you know that nobody spends their own money. It's debt and equity. And if it's a $100 million project, then $30 million, you put it out of your pocket as an equity, and 70 you raise as a debt. And thanks to our leadership, thanks to the sustainable consistent development of Kazakhstan. We're an investment grade country. Samruk Kazyna is investment grade holding national welfare fund. Therefore, we don't have any lack of supply of liquidity from not only IFIs but from world-class financial institutions. They all work with us and we work with them. And this is one source of potential liquidity. Moreover, the testimony to our good investment climate and to the wisdom of our leadership is that, as mentioned earlier, we are talking to Masdar, we are talking to Aqua Power, we are talking to China Power Investment Holding, we are talking Total. Today, the PPA of Total Eren was signed with the ministry. So everyone works here in Kazakhstan, and I'm talking only about renewables, and everyone is happy. So it's a win-win situation for everyone. If an investor wants to come and invest, we're happy to host him and to make some money together using the debt funds or liquidity from whoever believes in our country. So it's a win-win situation.
A win-win situation, and I don't know if it's a win-win situation that you are last in my round, Ariel Cohen, and that means that you are able to actually give us your thoughts on what you have just heard, and of course what you have prepared of key messages today about the challenges and the time ahead. So,
thank you very much. I work on Kazakhstan and Central Asia issues. A lot of work that we do at the Atlantic Council and the other nonprofit, the International Tax and Investment Center, focuses on energy. But I also write an energy column for Forbes. And between the two, I want to provide a word of caution. Oftentimes, people in the renewable energy and people who are sort of the COP community work in a bubble and talk to themselves a lot.
Is that what we are doing here at the moment?
I did not say that, but working in Washington, D.C. and living in the United States and also working in Europe a lot, I must say that not everybody is on board. And when we're talking about political will, in a democratic context, it means that at least a majority of people need to support the narrative of COP, the narrative of energy transition, the narrative of renewables. When I look out and see numbers such as 30% of German voters support Alternative für Deutschland, or the Republicans have a really good shot at presidency in 2024, I think those of us who, as Joschka Fischer put it once, believe in the green energy need to do more to communicate why is it important for a man or a woman in Texas or in Saxony in Germany, and I deliberately say Saxony. Now, in Kazakhstan, I think there is an absolutely unique opportunity because of the importance of rare earths and strategic minerals that are crucial to the energy transition, to green energy, to electrification of transportation, but also with the explosion of AI, artificial intelligence, and continuous growth of high-tech and electronics, rare earths, as opposed to strategic minerals, that can be mined and, very importantly, processed in Kazakhstan, are a trump card for your company or your holding and for Kazakh business. The distinction between strategic minerals such as cobalt, nickel, uranium, lithium, and rare earths such as, let's say, neodymium is significant in terms of chemistry, in terms of processing, and in terms of different economics. The strategic minerals are a part of regular mining economics, whereas rare earths are sui generis. They're a separate case. Central Asia is very rich in rare earths. Kazakhstan has 384 deposits of rare earths, to compare with Kyrgyzstan 75, Tajikistan 60, Uzbekistan 87, and Turkmenistan 2. So if you go where the deposits are, you come to Kazakhstan. Secondly, for processing, you need cheap energy, and Kazakhstan, as we just talked, has cheap energy and high concentration of the metal that I mentioned before, neodymium, in the deposits. What is the challenge? Why I'm talking about this at all? We're talking about it because 60% of mining and 90% of processing, of refining, of rare earths is in China. The US government articulated first decoupling, and now we changed language. We call it de-risking, having political risk lower. And clearly, when you're talking about a strategic area such as energy transition, such as electrification of transportation, batteries, etc., you want to have sources outside of China. You may say, but Kazakhstan is close to China. Yes, it is. But with the development of the middle corridor, which is a pathway from Kazakhstan across the Caspian to Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey, to the world market, you can mine, refine, and export rare earths and strategic minerals here. And the more the merrier, it's just decreasing the Chinese monopolistic position in this market. In terms of investment, Kazatomprom said that they're going to invest $800 million in rare earth extraction. EU and Japan have begun long-term investment programs in Central Asia REEs. You have the Kazakhstan mining codes from 2018 that is modeled on Western Australia code, and the G7 also has an initiative in terms of rare earth. So we're talking of deposits of probably close to, what, a couple of $1 trillion here? And the investment in many, many billions of dollars that can bring rare earths to the global market from Central Asia, giving it a necessary economic boost. For those of you who didn't study chemistry at high school as I did, in a great Soviet physical/mathematical school, sciences school, STEM, the complexity of processing is enormous. The CapEx is significant. This is a cutting edge of mining and refining. And yes, Kazakhstan can be a leader in that process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Kupov, I know that you are going in Sakupov, I'm sorry, I know that you are going in just a minute. So I think perhaps because there was so much that was pointing to that there is almost unlimited resources, beforehand in front of you. So could you share your thoughts on how to mine that opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I agree with your comments and observations. We are very lucky and blessed to have a variety of mineral resources, including rare and rare earth metals. And Kazatomprom is one of our subsidiary companies. We own 75% of Kazatomprom. They predominantly deal in uranium, but we do have an ambition to develop and mine rare and rare earth metals. And in this regard, I would like to use this opportunity to invite whoever is interested and whoever has enough expertise and financial capability to join us in development of rare and rare earth metals. The main challenge here, again, we have China next door with a very strong position on the market, and the main challenge is processing. Because rare earths, you need to be mindful about the purity and about the quality. You need to be mindful about the 5th digit after the comma. So it has to be very, very pure, 99.99999. And if you miss the 5th digit, then your investment, which you've invested into the infrastructure, into the technology, into the equipment, into the people, and if this product is not technically acceptable for the end users because the requirements are so high, that might be an issue. So there is an operational challenge and a marketing challenge. So as mentioned earlier, we have our great neighbors dominating the market in some of the materials, and therefore it would be interesting to compete.
Thank you, Matthew Segas. Could you give us I think I could almost see that there was something that went off in your head.
I mean, we've been hearing a common theme here, which is with the transition, you change the vulnerabilities that you have. And with traditional fossil fuels, they've been around for a long time. We're sort of aware of the vulnerabilities. We've seen them for decades now. With the transition, it's sort of a change. We heard about the issue of resource vulnerabilities. You're changing who has and who doesn't have. At the same time, we heard about the issue of renewables and the problem of, do you have balancing power? This is also a change in the nature of vulnerability. Another one is supply chains. Who produces the solar panels? Who produces the wind blades, the turbines and so forth? Where do they have to come from? Who brings them? There's a whole different supply chains than what we've seen before. So these are issues that you have to think about. At the same time, you have a number of other vulnerabilities that you haven't really thought about before. I mean, when we were talking about the sector, for example, notice that we pointed towards electrification as the way to go. It's renewables, it's hydrogen, it's transportation. Well, all that stuff is all going to be hooked up to the grid, and that means copper. Now, that might be good for Kazakhstan. Copper is big here, but it means that you're probably going to have a lot more of these strings running around the country, right and left. And is there a problem with permitting and so forth? So it changes the vulnerabilities in ways that we haven't seen before or haven't thought a lot about. So it's this kind of an issue.
Pelle Florenzi, could you? Yes, please.
Let me add a couple of considerations here. I think it's great to hear that people are getting attention to critical raw materials. We've been working them for a while because they are crucial for the energy transition. I would like just to bring 2 points to that one. Critical raw materials and mining operations require a lot of water. So issues around water, especially in Central Asia, are crucial. And the progress that these countries have made in collaborating together around water resources, it's welcome. More is needed, but water needs to be really taken into consideration, especially. And then the second consideration is the impact of climate change. I think in every investment, in every policy, in every scenario that industrialists are doing around the table, you should take into consideration the impacts of climate change. And we have seen it here in Astana yesterday or the day before yesterday when 38 degrees Celsius reached in this period of time, which I believe is unusual, at least, no, maybe not. but or let's put it this way, it's becoming more
Why?
common.
More usual, yeah.
It's
A bit too early.
Exactly. It's becoming more common. So certainly that's something that, because that has huge impacts on the operations, and therefore it all revolves around the concept of the building resilient energy systems. So energy systems, which are, the grid you mentioned, fundamental. There is a lot of investment that needs to go into not only reinforcing the Kazakhstan's grid, but the whole Central Asia grid, and connect with the other countries and contribute, because you have Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, we have certain natural advantages, and Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan have other natural advantages, and they should be trading, and trading between each other helps becoming more resilient. And energy resilience means affordability, sustainability, and security. Those three things are fundamental, and that's what should be taken into account when looking at that. So,
thank you, Bella. I was thinking about, because you are sitting with, as I said before, it's a well-used phrase, with your hands directly in the toolbox. So I wanted to have your thoughts on the change of supply chains and the whole transition, the whole shift, the considerations that you have in these now high-speed lane years.
Yeah. If I may first reflect on Mr. Cohen's comment regarding the.
Can you move a little closer to the microphone?
If I may comment on Mr. Cohen's comment regarding the green policymakers need to do a little bit better job to convince the population around the globe. I personally can't agree more, okay? So this is really a big issue. So we see left and right that this one did not penetrate the population yet globally. So there is a big decision at the top, there are lots of common intentions, but it's not there yet. And I think there is a very nice reflection of it in the Kazakhstan's development, okay? A few years back, there was a forced demand that let's do wind and solar, but there was nothing there to be able to do it, okay? So the supply chain, not from the materials, but from delivering it to Kazakhstan, to doing it in Kazakhstan, the policy was not there, right? The problems with the financing and the returns for foreign investors were not there. So it's an evolutionary process, and we cannot jump evolution. We need to make sure that we go step by step, and I think Kazakhstan did a fantastic job on that one, and that's where we see the pickup. Back to the supply chain. It's a very painful word, especially since COVID, okay? So we have not recovered for that one, so I did not even want to go into the deeper thing that these new technologies require new materials. Definitely, that's a challenge, but I think we're still not able to deliver what is the demand today. In every single of our industries, starting from aviation, ending up with energy technologies, etc., we are not able to come back even to the 19th level of production capabilities. So. But I think one more thing I wanted to say regarding the policies of Kazakhstan. We need to play in a way that policymakers can drive certain things, but we need to leave to all these instruments that proven themselves to work, namely the market mechanism, things that, and don't disturb those, okay? So any of these projects needs to be competitive, transparent. This is key. Without this, there will be no investors. And Mr. Jakubo mentioned the 6 gigawatts in the next 4 years, which he will be signing, and it's signed now. But by 2035, Kazakhstan needs to double their electricity production based on the demand and the modernization. So it's 18 gigawatts to be built. It needs investors. And the government is not planning to chip in big money. Like this was mentioned, 30%, I heard the 5% number. But to prove that, to make sure that it works, right, the policies of the country and the guarantees for the investors need to be such that they are ready to come and invest into Kazakhstan.
Thank you, David. You have said that everything is intertwined, that everything is connected. And the policy making, the supply chains, and you mentioned the rice and beef. Oh, no, that was not you. But I think we all were into that picture. Could you elaborate a bit on how to find that balance, because if we are going back to what I said in the start, we are leaving no one behind, but we have such an uneven geographic, geopolitical situation in terms of population, education, and everything. So how to find that balance? That's a very large question, I know.
Yes, I mean, and I'll give a very broad and generic answer. A lot of it's about planning and in the round, and I think you know, all governments in developing, middle income, it's a challenge to work, partly because of our structures, and it may be also in the private sector some way first. You know, the challenge of working beyond silos. Sometimes we're better at it, sometimes we're not. It sometimes goes in waves. But we need to get out of the trap that I hear so often around the world, including at home. The little climate and energy place, they do climate. I mean, we all do climate, you know, every single one of it, and it has to be infused into every act of public policy, every act of business planning, as we've already said. And it makes sense. The amazing thing for me, I mean, I do get out of the bubble because my job is to go out and talk to children, universities, academia, etc. And it's young people who have the clearest vision and see the connections. Whereas we somehow acquire magically over the years the ability to see nuance and tie ourselves in knots. Well,
so what are they saying to you when you go out and meet them?
Well, they say basically, we need to be here. We're here. You're supposed to get us there. How are you going to do it? And by the way, the clock's ticking. And so that's a very healthy, if rather threatening, question to be posed by young and very correct people. So the answer of it is to engage, consult, be transparent. We're talking about earlier, and do it in the way that you plan for your own transitions. In the UK, we a few years ago had a North Sea transition deal. The idea was working with governments, so I say governments because the government of Scotland as well, regulators and energy companies on reskilling, using the skills that already exist in the region to manage that transition. Means the continuation of what's going on, but on a downwards trend, moving into the new area, reskilling, but using the instincts that energy experts have acquired over many years, and thereby preserving and building jobs, and also creating local content in the supply chain. So all of that was quite a transparent exercise, and we'll see the final results play out. But that's the sort of structure that we should be using. And we used a similar thing for moving out of coal. And I wanted, if you give me a little bit of time, I wanted to talk about coal because I'm rather cautious about it. We moved from 40% of our coal, of our energy, electricity generation was coal 10 years ago. And now it's 2%. It's almost nothing. And that was doable without, while incorporating the social impacts. Again, you work transparently and through consultation. And we have more jobs, more green jobs as a result. So these things can happen. Now, we're having a good conversation about coal's position now, but we have a transition, and that means transition, so you're not turning off sources overnight, but it does mean movement, and it does mean it has to be quick. And I just wanted to finally, on coal, say I'm not a fan of green coal, which gets raised in this part of the world sometimes. The only green coal is the stuff that stays in the ground. And saying that it doesn't matter because you can just carbon capture and storage, whatever. There's all sorts of limitations and prices to be paid to going down that road. And I was really pleased to say the IPCC chair said the same thing this week.
Thank you, David. And I know you had Dario, but before I'll just take Ariel, who was kind of jumping out of your seat when David was
I'm
talking.
jumping out because if you have the decarbonization goal, interestingly enough, we did not mention one word, or two words, one word in all this discussion, which is nuclear. And nuclear is emission-free.
Yeah, Bella did.
Sorry. It's an emission-free source of a stable baseload. The challenge with the renewables is one, it's intermittent. The wind blows, the sun shines, fine. It can bring your cost of electricity to zero or even negative. However, at night, at a still night, at a night without wind, you have no renewable energy coming. And the second challenge is storage. We do not have technology that can store more than, an hour, a couple of hours of renewable electricity. However, with the nuclear, which is an established technology with new generation of nuclear reactors coming in, you have a stable baseload of carbon-free electricity. And with places like Germany, which first committed itself or overcommitted itself to Russian gas, and then when it decoupled from the Russian gas, it's also shut down 6 nuclear reactors. You do not have a very good time for nuclear energy. Different countries differ. In the United States, there's 1 nuclear reactor being built. 7 years over schedule, $17 billion over budget. This is not the way to do nuclear, nor the Finnish example in Finland with, I believe it's Arriva, right? That is also over schedule, over the budget. But let's not discount it. And by the way, we're in Kazakhstan, which is excuse my pun, Saudi Arabia of uranium. Thank you.
That's right.
Well, that was a whole new topic that we could discuss for days. I know but it's another panel, yes, and another day. Dario, you were also wanted to comment. We're almost out of time, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, very quickly, what we're trying to say here is there is no magic solution. And every country needs to design its own path to carbon neutrality. All the technologies have a role to play, all of them, all of the technologies and the right pace. And I think depending on the individual situation within the country, Kazakhstan is a blessed country, but there are other countries around the region which are less blessed. They need to take a different sort of policies. But I think the point that everybody is trying to make here is that it takes the will to design that path, stick to it, execution. I cannot, I worked 11 years for GE, so execution is my mantra as well. And that is clear, it's not PowerPoint presentations, it's not just political declarations, it's actually execution and timing about that. And that's crucial, I think, and but there is no magical solution. I think people will need to understand that the transition is hard. It creates opportunities and it creates losers, winners and losers, and the losers need to be part of that transition because otherwise you won't have a transition. So you mentioned just transition is a concept that gets quickly dismissed, but is very, very important. You need to take, I think Dave made a very excellent point, transparency and include everybody because otherwise you won't have a transition.
So leave no one behind, but and I'm going to leave you behind in just 2 minutes, but I would like to end on your personal ambition, as I asked in the beginning, for COP28, or what would you like to see play out on COP22? And I'll start all the way down there with you, Bella.
Just very quickly, I fully agree. The only thing I would comment, you said winners and losers, there are always losers. I would think that to pick up on David's point, it's one house. At the end, everybody's a winner of everything what we are doing. Regarding the ambitions, look, I worked here in Kazakhstan from 16 to 20, and when I arrived, I said, I want to see the first gas-powered power plant with a G logo on it. We'll have it. It's going to be the very first one which is going to happen. Not the Almaty one, the Kizilorda one, but it's going to happen. My wish for COP28 is that it clears the path that I will see those nuclear reactors and even more power plants with a sustainable and much greener sources of energy with the G logo in this country. David?
I think for those, the COP as a whole, I hope that it's a big agenda, and I hope that they strengthen the mitigation, the commitments, meet the finance, both the public one and private, and access multilateral finance. But my personal ambition is to dare people to dream, because there's a risk. The impacts could be really terrible, and the impact could be existential. And what we forget in looking at that is that we can change that. And we can change that in such a way that we produce a virtual circle of improvement. So let's have a transition which starts at COP28, which moves from vicious circles to virtuous circles, and dream high, aim high.
There you go.
After this was very hard to say anything, anything else is peanuts, basically. No, one thing that we have not discussed at this panel, which is I think is my personal ambition is because a big issue is about adaptation. Mm-hmm. I mean, we talked a lot about mitigation, but I think adaptation is crucial, and it's crucial for the next few years, and it's crucial for mitigation, for the transition, for the acceptability from a social perspective of adaptation. And we have not thought enough about how to adapt our world to the climate change, which is coming, is here. It's going to get worse before it actually gets better. So how do we survive that part before we see the benefits of the mitigation that we need to follow in parallel with that? So for me, advances in adaptation.
Thank you, Matthew.
I'm in a very difficult spot here because what I was going to say, but I like the vision of David, and I also really believe in adaptation, but my view is very practical, which is there's this television show called Curb Your Enthusiasm, okay? And it's very nice to get very excited, but let's be real, is sort of my statement at the end of the day. Let's be real.
Thank you, and Ariel.
Couldn't agree more about being real. I consider myself a realist. However, I think that we are living in an increasingly polarized world in which Russia and China are pulling in one direction, and US and our allies in the West are pulling in another direction. Unfortunately, countries like Kazakhstan are stuck in between. The question is, do the rulers of all these countries have wisdom to recognize that what we're staring at, AI, climate change, pandemics, supersedes our differences, and we need to get to a point where the war in Ukraine ends, in my personal opinion, hopefully in the defeat of Russia, and we move on to solving the big boys problem, the real problems, boys and girls, the real problems that the world is facing that threatens our very existence.
Thank you very much, and it was both, I think, optimistic, a little pessimistic, and certainly we all need to put our work clothes on and get to work, preferably with each other, in cooperation internationally. So I would like to thank you today for your insights, your perspectives. I think that I'm sure that the audience will agree with me that it has been a very interesting and also looking forward to COP28 in November. I'm hoping that all your personal ambitions will come through, or at least in a few years after that. So thank you very much.